And most people do actually want to be diamonds, but they're afraid of the work. And they're also afraid that it's going to be imposed on them, right? And they're going to be forced into it. And they don't have a vision of their own. And so one of the things that everyone who's listening and watching might want to understand is that before you go into a job interview, you might want to have done some serious thinking about just exactly why it is that you want this job. And if the answer is, well, I need to pay next month's rent, fair enough, but that is not a good enough reason. That's not a vision for your life. And that's not the sort of vision that's going to make you a compelling interviewee, because you're shallow, right? You haven't thought through why it is that you're going to do what you're doing. We have this program online called Future Authoring, and it helps people develop a vision for their life. And so the game is this, and you can think about this as preparation for a crucial job interview. It's like, imagine yourself 5 years down the road. Okay, so here's the game. You can have what you want, but you have to specify what it is. And then someone might say, well, I don't really know what I want. And fair enough, because that's a pretty vague and global question. But the program then asks people 7 questions. It's like, what would your relationship look like, your primary relationship, your marriage, if it was functioning the way that you would want it to? What about your friendship? What about your business relationships? Are you educating yourself? How are you going to do that? How do you keep yourself in mental and physical shape? What are you going to do with your time outside of work? How are you going to serve the community? So so that starts to differentiate it, right? And then the game you play there with yourself is, okay, under what conditions would I be motivated to pursue success in those areas? And people are scared of this partly because they don't want to reveal to themselves what they actually want, because they might betray themselves or be betrayed by the world. And partly because they're afraid of the responsibility and they don't have enough faith. But it's impossible to hit a target that you don't aim at. And then you might say, well, why is that relevant to a job interview? And there's a bunch of reasons. Is that if the job interview goes well and you actually start to have a discussion rather than just a staged interview, if you have a vision for your own life, you're going to be able to see if this job will work for you. And that also puts you in a good position in the interview, because you pointed out earlier as we were talking that, even in a job interview, that's a negotiation. And the reason it's a negotiation is because, well, you want the job, but hopefully they want you and you're the right person. And so really the interview should be establishing the preconditions for the collaboration that you described, rather than, pulling the wool over some idiot's eyes so that they'll hire you so you can slack off, which seems like a pretty damn dismal vision of what your life might be.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And thinking those things through. I mean, I've had some interviews for assistants on my job recently that were cut short because the people that were doing the interviews didn't know what company they were interviewing for. They got it mixed up. And we're like, all right, so there's a certain lack of degree of preparation here. Thank you very much for your time.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're going to ask yourself, aren't you, if someone comes in and they don't know what it is that you do or what they would do, then the first question that would come to mind is something like, well, then what do they know? Because that's such an elementary error that it's essentially catastrophic.
Well, that's an indicator of what they're going to put into the job. How you do anything is how you do everything.
That's right. It's what they already did put into the job, because the most important task they had as a potential hiree was preparation for the interview. And if they failed that, well, that's not a great start. And then that's especially true. Another thing for everybody watching and listening to think about too is that it is the case that first impressions are lasting. There is a very long and dense psychological literature establishing that, And so you want to be prepared enough in the interview so that people walk away from talking to you thinking, geez, it'd be a good thing if we got that guy. And certainly you're in a much better position to do something like salary negotiation if that's the impression, and the valid impression, right? That's another thing, is this can't be, look, man, if you're going to start your new job on a stack of lies, you've already insured your failure in some fundamental sense. And so if you're afraid before you go into the interview that you're not prepared, you want to get prepared so that you're not afraid like that, so that you can go and you can admit your inadequacies honestly, as long as they're not so, absolutely there's not so many of them that you're obviously not the candidate for the job. So,
hey, Jordan, I'm going to have
now
you coaching me on my next job interview.
You talked about listening.